What if you define their sex as a relevant difference? Like, you don't want women to be firefighters because they can't lift as much and they're not as strong. I don't know. What's he going to say? What's a relevant difference? So that's a really sloppy sentence. Actually, the principle of equal treatment, which he's just messing around here, is the golden rule, which says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So that if you invade their village and kill their women and children and take their goods, you can expect someone to do it to you. Live by the sword, die by the sword. That's the golden rule. He says, he equivocates it into treating people equally, unless there's a relevant difference. Now at this point, he analyzes the quality of applicants to law school, saying if there's 2 applicants to law school, he analyzes if they were completely equal, only there's this and that difference. You know, really tedious. We all understand. That's really basic. He couldn't do anything a little bit better. He's doing a college text here. Just 2 applicants to law school and how we should treat them equally. Now his next example was the draft. Get this. Now, academicians are allowed to mention several things. They can mention slavery, sexism or women lib, feminism, right? Sexism, women lib, feminism, or Vietnam. They're allowed to mention those things. There might be 1 or 2 others, but not many more. So his next example is the draft. And he says it followed the principle of fair and equal treatment. Now this is what Ayn Rand called context dropping. You drop the entire context of these soldiers. Where were these soldiers who were drafted? Well, in Rachel's example, these soldiers were floating in this vacuous, nebulous netherworld of nothing. And when they were all drafted, they were treated equally, so that's the principle of equal treatment holds with the draftees, because they were all treated equally when they were drafted. Ayn Rand would say these soldiers, before they were drafted, were in the context of their own lives, society, human society, life on Earth. And to take some of them and not others, even if it's taking men and not women, or taking young and not old, drafting somebody even though they don't want to go, that's not equality. To say we're taking men of a certain age, that's not principle of equal treatment. You couldn't say they'll take everybody unless there's a relevant reason. Maybe this is where he'd say a relevant reason comes in. But to give the draft as an example of equality, equal treatment, that is bizarre, and I think that it hides an agenda of his. Namely, the Democrats, so peaceful and loving, are always the ones to take us into big wars. And you wouldn't be surprised to find the Democrats the ones who want a draft. And the Democrats are the ones who want to increase taxes 80 or 90% so that we can fight Germany or whoever it is. So it doesn't surprise me too much to see him defending the fairness of the draft. But then the details of what he goes over talking about the draft, probably it's in the details that he tries to make the college students sick who are reading it. And so they're then against Vietnam in the draft because they've heard this explanation, this example. Okay, so let's leave that point after I say this last thing. You gather a bunch of men up under threat of force. If they don't come, you'll put them in jail. And if they resist the police, you'll go so far as to kill them when the police come to arrest them if they really resist. So under threat of force, you gather a bunch of men together. Then you tell them, we're going to treat you all equally. This is not a good example of equality. Okay. Skipping to the next segue. No segue. We'll just go on to the next thing. All of the above, everything he's just said, is establishing the idea that equal treatment is the only moral way to act. He just assumes this, the golden rule restatement that he makes. Assumes that equality, 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 and then goes and analyzes all these things. Now remember, treat everyone equally unless there's a relevant difference. At 7 minutes and 18 seconds, quote, thus racism is an arbitrary doctrine, end quote, because he says there are no differences between the races. There are a couple, like their skin color and stuff, but no, I don't believe there are any important differences. Not that he has the capacity to recognize what they have in similarity. What is the essential similarity of all humans? Their rational mind. That's the source of their rights, is the fact that you can reason with them. And if they give up reason and rationality, and they start using physical force, we have a place called prison for those people. So the reason that people have rights is because of their reasoning faculty, their rationality. I'm just throwing that in there because it might be interesting to somebody watching this who wonders, how do you refute racism? Sure, he's black and this guy's white, they're different, but fine, that's an arbitrary doctrine, fine. At least it's based on perceptive facts. Anyways, going on to 7 minutes 29 seconds, just a few seconds later, quote, ethical egoism is a moral theory of the same type. It advocates that we divide the world into two categories of people, ourselves and everyone else. Now that's pretty fatuous. That's pretty bizarre to say I'm in one category and everybody else on the planet is in another category. No, that's not how Ayn Rand's egoism goes, and that's not how any type of egoism I've ever heard of goes. It goes like this. I have to exist for myself. Now, let me back up for 1 second. If this guy is right, then ethical egoists would be very confused if they were on a desert island, because half of the world's not there. They've got themselves, but there's everybody else. The other category's gone, so how do they act? Ayn Rand's philosophy would give you guidance on a desert island by yourself alone. But this guy's idea of ethical egoism, where you're always judging against other people and you're always not there in yourself, it's always this other category and stuff, that doesn't give you any moral guidance in the real world. So he says once we've divided the world into these two categories, then we're supposed to regard our interests as more important than everyone else's interests. Now, he's dropping that context there. There's too much wrong there. No, like I said, it's got to work on a desert island, too. And no, an egoist doesn't regard his interests as more important than everyone else in society. He regards his interests as sovereign, sacrosanct, and everyone else as their own. He regards his interests as his own private affair. He doesn't think that he's part of a group. This guy, Rachel, says that we're all part of humanity, and dividing ourselves off on a little pocket is absurd. He says it's like racism. Individualism is like racism. Now you've got it from Rachel's. This is bizarre. No, you don't say I'm better and my desires are more important. You say I have my desires. Period. I'm alive for the sake of my own happiness. Period. Now, what brings happiness? Like I said, I'm not a psychological egoist. Happiness is not brought by rape, pillage, and plunder. Happiness is achieved through long-term rational planning. As Aristotle said, a single swallow, a little bird, or a nice sunny day does not make a summer. And a single day of joy or drunkenness or picnicking with friends or something does not make a happy life. A happy life requires long-term planning. So, very far from Rachel's idea that we divide the world up into ourselves and everyone else. An ethical egoist doesn't regard everyone else as a group. They regard themselves as a sovereign entity on the planet, here for their own happiness. And the best way to get their own happiness is to plan rationally in the long term. Now, you say, well then what's to stop me from going and robbing a bank? Well, first of all, the police and the jails and stuff. But second of all, I know that the best way to get rich is not to rob, but to produce. Because first of all, nobody will be out to get me. Nobody will be, even if you did that in an anarchy society where there's not a lot of law, like in Moscow, you go rob banks and pay off the cops. Why not? Because somebody will assassinate you. Or the cops next week will come and arrest you because they got paid off even more by somebody else. So, if you want to live by the sword, you die by the sword. Someone who wants happiness, an objectivist, a person who is an ethical egoist, doesn't do that. They want happiness in the long term. They don't want happiness today and the rest of their life in prison or on the run. They want happiness in the long run. So that's a picture of ethical egoism that Rachel's probably can't wrap his head around. The stupid ninny.